Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today is my review of Boosh, Age of Ash by Daniel Abraham. So this is book one in the Kithamar trilogy, a brand new series, a brand new fantasy series by Abraham writing solo. So for most of you, you are probably most familiar with Daniel Abraham from his work on The Expanse, being one half of the writing duo that is James S.A. Corey. So this is his first return to solo work. And so this is an advanced reader copy, so kindly sent to me by Orbit Books in exchange for an honest review. So thank you so much for the privilege of getting to read this a few weeks early. So right off the bat, I want to let everyone know, for good or ill, whatever you believe from this statement, that this feels very much like a first book of an Abraham series. For me, that is an excellent thing. I love the way Daniel Abraham plots his novels. This is my third first book in an Abraham series. Long Price Quartet, I've read the entire thing of. I've read the first book of Dragon's Path, of Dagger and Coin, which is Dragon's Path, and I've talked to people about the rest of that series. And now this one. And I know in Long Price Quartet, and I am assuming in Dagger and Coin, that he has planned everything out from the beginning. And so sometimes, people accuse the first books of being slow. And if this is something you're concerned about, I need to, right off the bat, tell you to please trust the process. Trust Daniel Abraham. He knows what he is doing. The payoff is going to be so worth it, just like it was in Long Price Quartet, just like it was for many people in Dagger and Coin, how I know it's going to pay off for me as well. And this is because Abraham is such a brilliant character writer. Abraham's novels are not necessarily about the events of the book. They are about the characters and their relationships with one another. What makes the Long Price Quartet so fantastic is not just wonderful characters like Ota and Mati, but the relationship between these two and the other people that they come in contact with over their lives. And we have that same thing here. So there are two really main characters in this novel, but before I talk about them, I want to talk about the secret third character, which is really the setting that this story takes place in. Age of Ash is the first in the Kithamar trilogy because the story takes place in this massive city called Kithamar. And Kithamar it's just this ancient city that is kind of built on top of each other, like it's bisected by a river. And on the west side of the river were these kind of conquering people called the Hanch, and then on the other side were kind of the victims of the advancing Hanch called the Inlisk people. And over the centuries, the Hanch went across the river and conquered the Inlisk villages, and then everything just kind of got assimilated into the same city. And so, just like cities like Rome, which first had the Servian Wall, and then the Aurelian walls, like there's the remnants of the old walls, there's, buildings built on the skeletons of other buildings. The east side is kind of made of like wooden buildings, and then the west side are more of the stone buildings. The city is broken up into different like boroughs, like we have Long Hill and Stone Market and Green Hill and Seepwater, which is where, the river, kind of the edges, there's like silt and stuff on the edges of that. That's where the water seeps out. And Abraham does a masterful job describing place. You feel like you are right there in the city of Kithamar. His sense of place and drawing you into the locales that this book takes place in is masterful. Kithamar is a dirty, filthy, rotting city, and you feel every inch of that. His sensory description, you know what every borough feels and smells and looks like. Our main borough is Long Hill. It's a very, very poor district of Kithamar, and Abraham's prose is already beautiful. He is a brilliant technical writer, and it is just such an incongruity that his prose remains beautiful, but is also dirty and gross to fit the setting. Like, just the way, the word choice he uses, and even through the dialogue, and it's still beautiful, but it also feels, very raw and dirty and unclean, the same way that Kithamar does. And so kind of everything, all of the description, the prose, the dialogue, the sensory details, this all just serves to drag you in and make us feel like we're really there, which is so important to the larger story being told. The west side of the river is where the wealthy live. That's they're descendants of the Hanch. That's where the nobles and the priesthoods and the great families are from. And usually people on the east side don't really have reason to cross over because they're extraordinarily conspicuous. But like I said, the main story takes place in a borough called Long Hill, which is in the southeast of Kithamar, and it's one of the, if not the poorest districts in Kithamar. And Long Hill, they're descendants of those conquered Inlisk people. And here's just an example of kind of the evocative nature. The quarter remade itself. Street maps drawn just a generation before were worse than useless. There were stories that old Inlisk priests still held the ancient rites somewhere, deep in the shadows and narrow streets. But no one seemed quite sure what those rites were. Round Inlisk faces and curled Inlisk hair were normal here. The food that old men sold door to door from greasy sacks used more hot peppers and pickled fish than they ate near the temple or in Stone Market. The hard percussive accent of the people who lived in Long Hill was a remnant of the language they had once shared and now shared in forgetting. A city within the city, Long Hill clung to its pride like a man with only one good shirt. Just that paragraph of description is so rich in detail and so specific. I love descriptions filled with specificity. So the story at large is it's an impoverished story about two incredibly poor characters. One named Alice and the other named Samish. And from the very first chapter, we see them running what's called a pull, which is essentially a public sleight of hand robbery where there's like three people involved. One marks someone and does distracting, and then someone else approaches them and lifts what they need, what they're stealing, and then they pass it off to a third person who's really nondescript and walks away. And everyone acts like nothing's wrong, and so they don't get caught. So this is how they're just kind of making ends meet, because again, everyone's very poor. But as you know, if you've read the back of this book, Alice's brother, who is also a ne'er-do-well, like small-time criminal, is killed. And that's the inciting incident early in the book. And Alice is determined. The plot of this is Alice trying to find out who killed her brother. And that's a very basic plot, a very standard, like, kind of revenge tale. But Abraham does so much more with this. This is a profound story about grief and personal loss. We watch Alice. I don't actually like Alice all that much, but she is a fantastic character because Abraham is one of the best character writers in the business. Alice is just so consumed by this grief, this loss of her brother. Like, we just see the lengths that she'll take to honor his memory and to find out, like, who did it. She begins kind of taking on qualities of her brother, acting the way he would act in this kind of desperate attempt to keep his memory alive. And she's not a super good person while she's trying to find this out. She has this friend, one of the ones working the pull with her, named Samish, who is this just nondescript girl that's, they're roughly Alice's age. They're of an age. And she is nursing a secret crush on Alice. And Alice doesn't know, but it's just so pitiable because, I teach public school. I see high schoolers, deal with this all the time. I dealt with this where you're nursing a secret crush and, you're a fool. So Samish is constantly doing things to try to help Alice in her quest to find out what happened to her brother. And until it becomes like unhealthy and toxic, and she's doing things that aren't good for her just because she's hoping that if she does these things, Alice will notice her. And, if she notices her, then, maybe she'll like her. And Alice is just, her obsession. She uses people, and she's one of these people. Alice is just one of these people that is very, very self-absorbed in this novel, to where if she needs people, she is expecting to be able to find them and utilize them or cry on their shoulder or have them help her. And she's just like absolutely flabbergasted and stunned and angry when they are not at her beck and call. And so the story is about Alice coming to grips with her grief. Because it isn't just grief at losing her brother, it's grief at not understanding why she lost her brother. And so Alice and Samish, they're just both dealing with so many feelings and so many emotions that conflict. These people feel very real. You do not have to like them to understand that this is fantastic character work. They feel three-dimensional, fully realized. They have wants, they have fears, they have desires and vulnerabilities. And watching how Alice, watching the stages of grief that she goes through, grief and rage and arrogance and this incredible self-absorption, and Samish's search for identity and her affection toward Alice and her sense of right and wrong. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly moving, even though some might say that not much happens. This is a slow burn. Abraham novels are slow burns. If the only thing you have read by Daniel Abraham is The Expanse, or even just Leviathan Wakes, you should not expect that same thing here. There is not a ton of action. It is a slow burn character study with a plot at large kind of moving in the background. And even the plot that is going on is only a piece of what is really being kind of unveiled piece by piece in these books. So for the first half of the book or so, you're following these characters, getting to know them, trying to pick up on the hints and the foreshadowings and the Chekhov's guns that Daniel Abraham is putting in it. That's definitely going to pay off later. And then everything starts to unfold and things start happening. And the last 15% of this book is so anxiety-inducing. His ability to quietly ratchet up tension and just make your palms sweat and be afraid for what is happening. There is so much, my palms just started sweating thinking about it again. There is so much anxiety and tension in the last section of this book. And when it ends, I am left wanting more, wanting the next book to be out, to figure out where is it going to go. Because the conceit of this, according to the back of the book, is that over the course of this year, this plot is going to be told from 3 different perspectives. And so each one is going to have to cover slightly different amount of time. I'm assuming some will go past this endpoint, some will start in before, or whatever. I am almost certain, 10 guineas to a bent hat pin, that I know who the POV is going to be for book 2. But I cannot wait to see how this plot continues to unfold and see the new character relationships that he's going to be introducing. So other than these characters, other than the study of grief, it's also a study of friendship and family and loyalty to friends and family and to the place that bore you, to your cultural and geographical identity. The people in Long Hill have a phrase that's it's like once Long Hill, always Long Hill, or why are you doing this thing even though you didn't have to? And they just like, I'm Long Hill. Like, these are my cultural roots. This is my identity. I'm from Long Hill. And the people from Long Hill don't like when people start to think, because they're the poorest. They're like the worst of the districts. And so when people start acting uppity and move out and start wearing fancy clothes, that Long Hill closes in. It's a very, everybody in Long Hill, but once you start acting like you're better than them, well, ranks start to close and people stop talking to you, and all of a sudden you can't get information from them and you can't go to the safe places you used to go because you're betraying that identity that you've had all this time. And by extension, you're spitting in the faces of the people who went through these hard experiences alongside you. Winter in Long Hill is not something that is easily weathered. It is harsh, and people die in the streets from starvation or lack of shelter. And there is a brilliant scene between Alice and her mother that is just incredibly powerful. And Alice's relationship with Darrow and the memory of Darrow, and then of course Samish and Alice's relationship. It's just so good. Abraham is a master of his craft, and I will always read anything he writes. I cannot wait to see where this series is going to end up. An Abraham book is so hard to kind of wrap your head around because the sum of what he's doing is always so much greater than its individual parts. When I finished Long Price Quartet, the individual books, my opinion of them was just so incredibly elevated by what every one of them was building toward than they were. I loved them initially. I loved them when I read them individually. But when it was done, Abraham does things in such a way that the later books elevate how good the earlier books are. So I cannot wait to see what I think about this trilogy when all is said and done. Abraham, he writes some of the most memorable characters in fantasy. I think about his characters, like I said, Ota and Mati, and several others from Long Price Quartet. I think about Getter Palaiko, and I've only read the first book of Dagger and Coin. I still think about Getter. These are just great characters that stick with you. He's one of the best in the business at this. So guys, on the Kingfin approval system, I give Age of Ash a superb. It is a superb book. It is really, really good. If you are one of the people who thinks it is slow, stick with it and trust me. First of all, the book itself will pay off. Second, I promise you, the trilogy is going to be worth it. And out of 5 stars, I gave this book 4.5 stars that I am fully prepared to change to 5-star probably after I read the second book, because the second book, I think these books more than any of the other ones are going to inform the previous ones since they take place over that same time period. So I fully anticipate after reading book 2 to go back and change this to 5 stars. That's what I did with Long Price Quartet. As soon as I was done reading it, shot those earlier books back up to 5 stars because it really is. It is the beginnings of a masterpiece being painted. This book, guys, if you have not read Abraham before, this is a great place to start. I think the world and like the society is more familiar for fantasy readers. It is less confusing and maybe frustrating than the Kayate in A Shadow in Summer. And I think that Age of Ash is on its own, just as a standalone, is better than Dragon's Path, at least in my opinion. Though I think that Getter from Dragon's Path is an exceptional character. I really like both Alice and Samish. I don't love them as much as I love Ota and Mati, but I can never go back to the time when I had only seen them in a single book. I have the whole series as an experience now. So I'm wondering how I'll feel about Alice and Samish when all is said and done. Guys, this comes out February 15th. Please pre-order this. Pre-order it so that we can get more Daniel Abraham books. It is absolutely fantastic. Have you read Abraham before? If you have, what's your favorite Abraham series? If you haven't read Abraham, are you planning on picking this book up? Guys, that's all I have for you today. As always, information about my Discord and Patreon will be down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.